Hi, this is Neas with Behind the Art Scene at KXVS, the voice of Stockton. And today my guest is Patty Lovato. Thank you very much for coming, Patty.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, good. And so I first met Patty with Reinvent South Stockton. We were in this education group, and we've been trying to influence make Stockton education better. And Patty would like to talk about how she used art in education in the schools and how you incorporate art into all the different disciplines. And that's how I learned when I was growing up. So you were sharing all these interesting ideas that you've done when you were a teacher. So.
Okay. There were a number of ways that I really enjoyed doing art with students. I taught kindergarten through 8th grade, mostly upper grade math and science. We had a school garden, and I incorporated science and math into what the students did with the school garden. One of the art activities we did as a school, which was an art magnet school, was to have the children keep journals when we planted seedlings and then planted them in the garden. In the journals, the students kept track of the seedlings' growth. So about every 3 days, they would draw a picture of what happened in the containers in which they had the seedlings. Before we planted the seedlings, I would collect maybe 5 pictures from very old botanical books which had pictures that had been drawn of plants and flowers and seeds. And we would do an activity involving the students talking about comparing the number of leaves, the number of petals, the colors in the botanical drawings. And we would talk about what the how the plants look compared to plants that they may see outside. And then each day in their journals, the students would measure the height and width of the seedlings they planted, count the number of leaves, and write whatever applied to their seedlings. Then they would draw what they saw on their seedlings and use the colors that that showed what their seedlings looked like.
So how many weeks did they do this? Or?
They did this until we planted the seeds in the garden, and then kept drawing and kept measuring for as long as the plants were growing.
So how long would you say they were growing?
Until, well, for the entire school year, and we would then get to draw whatever the vegetables or fruits were which grew on the plants.
So how long did it usually take to get vegetables and fruits?
It depended on the weather. I was teaching in Santa Cruz, so during the winter and spring, we got nice weather, and we usually had vegetables before the school year was over.
So this reminds me of, and I keep telling this story, it's my one story. So, we're all, I think, a collection of our stories, but my favorite teacher, I had a bunch of wonderful teachers, but my all-time favorite was my 6th grade teacher, and she did this with us. She took us out to the playground, and there was this tree, and we each adopted a branch and a certain section of it. And I think it was for 2 weeks. We would go out and draw, and here's a little leaf coming, and there's a bud, and we'd show all the changes. But your sounds much more elaborate than we ever did. But yeah, it's the same thing. That's wonderful.
I think it's great that you got to do that, because prior to what we did with the garden, I think a lot of kids didn't have the opportunity to really look at things in nature and look at the changes in colors of leaves and look at the size of plants and notice that some were very, very small and some were very large. So I'm really glad your teacher did that.
So what were some of the things that you guys grew?
We grew beans and squash and tomatoes and larger vegetables that would ripen before school was out. And we grew a lot of leafy green vegetables that the kids could eat as they got ripe. And one year I tried to do what my husband had done at his school, which was to grow winter wheat. And then we were going to harvest it and grind it and make bread out of it.
Oh, wow.
Except that another teacher had a wonderful parent who took her kids out to weed the garden, and they pre-harvested my kids' winter wheat.
They thought it was weeds.
They did. They did. And so we had a wonderful talk about grasses and people's attitudes about grasses.
Actually, my husband and I, we really like this show. It's called State Plate.
I don't know that.
It's just this wonderful show. I'm not sure what channel it's on, but Taylor Hicks, so he's the musician. So I guess he has a restaurant, but so he's the host of the show, and he goes to all each segment is a different state.
How great!
And so he goes all to different states, and so he was talking about California, and I've been waiting for California. So he has a dinner plate, and he says, "Now, what would you think? What foods would go on that dinner plate to symbolize California?" So we were all trying to figure out what he was going to do. So first he started off with avocados, and he made it. They made that into guacamole and had it with tortilla chips. So I said, "Yes, I love avocados, and I always have guacamole here, especially in Stockton." And but then he went through, and so there was all the shellfish that we have, and they made cioppino, and they had French bread from San Francisco, the sourdough French bread. But then they went to Castroville, and they said that's like one of the only places that they grow artichokes.
Yes. And
so they were harvesting the artichokes, and I didn't, it never came together for me, but he said that right now that they harvest it before it flowers, because it's really like in the thistle.
It's a thistle, yeah.
And I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so.
We lived right near a bunch of artichoke fields when I lived in North Monterey County. And so there's a place called the Giant Artichoke, which is actually a place which has produce and artichokes, but also is a place where people can stop and get sandwiches and other things. And there is an artichoke festival in Castroville. So it's like other things. Now, my question is, did Stockton get some kind of award for asparagus? Because artichokes, asparagus, and avocados. So did we get...
So what he put on the state plate, he went down to... So it was actually Carpinteria, where I guess they had the first avocado, the Haas avocado.
Yes.
And so he made that in the guacamole. Then he went to San Francisco and had cioppino and the sourdough bread. I thought he should have gone to Boudin, but he didn't.
Yeah.
But then my husband said, they probably wouldn't have given him permission because it's proprietary. And then... But he said, that we're known like for almost like the salad bowl of the area. And he mentioned like all these different fruits and vegetables. He didn't say Stockton. But then I think he was singling out something that was so unique was the Castroville and the artichoke.
Yeah.
So he mentioned the artichoke. And then his last thing, I don't know I love dessert. So he, what are you going to have for dessert? So he went out to some almond field.
Yes.
And they had almonds, and he's, you can have that with cinnamon sugar. So that was the dessert.
It should have been almonds and stone fruit.
So.
Because California is also so well known for stone fruit, especially around here, and cherries, and the asparagus.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised.
Yeah, I didn't say that. So, but I'm so thankful to live in California.
Yes.
California is my home. They have all these things on Facebook that, what state are you meant to live in? And I took the little quiz. I got California.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm used to being around all the fruits and vegetables and all the seafood, all my favorite things. I eat salads, 2 to 3 times a week. And one of my favorite things, actually, one of my favorite memories of home, and when you're talking about the garden, we had our backyard, and my dad grew a garden. And seeing the zucchini come into being, and then my mom, she's very adventurous with cooking, so she found this little recipe for taking a zucchini, the blossom, the blossom, and filling it with some meat filling and the squash blossom, and so I was introduced to, I was able to have those foods out of the garden. And it was wonderful to see them grow and to eat them.
Yeah.
So flavorful, so tasty. Really enjoyed it.
And you were lucky to have that as a kid, because a lot of kids don't have that. And one of the reasons we did the school garden was to make sure that the kids, especially those who did not grow up and grow gardens, got to try vegetables that they would not have otherwise had. And a lot of the kids here now who eat fast food because it's cheap don't have access to gardens and don't have access to fresh vegetables. They're expensive.
So when you were doing that at the school, then when would you guys eat them? Like at lunchtime or a snack? Or
That's a good question. Mostly during class time, we would pick vegetables and either have them as salads or cook them. Mm-hmm. And the school where I taught for most of my teaching career did not have kids who were in poverty and didn't have access to good fruit and vegetables. Most of them did have. They weren't wealthy, but they were kids who had good food and whose parents were very dedicated to making sure that their kids ate well, but they hadn't seen them growing. Right. And so this was an opportunity for them to see from where the foods came.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now what I'd like to talk about, Stockton. I love Stockton. Stockton is the greatest place on earth, but we do need some improvements, sadly.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes.
So you were trying to start a school garden here.
Yes.
What are the pitfalls?
I think a lot of the pitfalls are that schools are very, very busy with a great many other things, and teachers are overwhelmed with a lot of requirements, some of them preparing for standardized testing, some of them having a great deal of curriculum which needs to be covered. In my teaching career, I went from having educational books which may have had, for example, let's say 80 pages, to books which were given to us or which we chose which had 800 pages. I was fortunate to work in schools and have principals who basically allowed us to create our own curriculum and teach in ways that we felt were best for students, as long as our test scores stayed at a level which was considered acceptable, and our test scores always did. So we weren't asked to use curriculum that wasn't what was comfortable for us, especially new teachers and teachers who feel really dedicated to using certain curricula continue to use that. And I am not casting judgment on that. Having said that, it does take time. Mm-hmm. And so I have found that a number of schools I have approached have been reluctant to do school gardens because the teachers, again, feel overwhelmed by what's required. The other reluctance comes from something which is actually a fabulous thing, which is STEM and STEAM programs. And those science and technology programs are already implemented, and to fit a garden into a program which is already science and math based is difficult. So I'm hoping that a way can be worked out which can include the garden. Mm-hmm. I have been working with a wonderful woman, Keegan Gillette, who's doing an after-school program at Rosa Parks Academy, and she has a garden club in that after-school program. And so I have been volunteering as a person working in the after-school garden club, which I have loved. There is the school garden at Rosa Parks, and I would like to try to set up after-school programs at other schools so some of the kids can do the gardens.
Well, that's wonderful. I just think about this whole thing about curriculum, and when I was going to school, like you were saying, how you incorporated the art, and you were talking about also you use art with mathematics, and you can bring art into anything. I think we need to cross, the disciplines, and when you're teaching one thing, you can teach it all at once. It's because it's all interconnected, and this whole thing about teaching to the test or what. I mean, that's what makes it all boring. That's why people, let's just drop out of school. And, I love school with all my heart, but, I want some flexibility of how I learn and to make it interesting, fascinating, see how it's all connected. I really don't care for science, but, if I can bring the art into it and, it makes it so interesting. Like I went to a display they had in San Jose, looking at, there was an artist who, I think they did this with microscopes, but they looked at snowflakes under microscopes, and you're seeing, oh my goodness, just all the patterns and how it all comes together. And that could be art, but it's science, and you got to combine it all. Then it's a rich, interesting, wonderful place. I mean, if we could get back to that, let teachers, teach how they want to teach. And, as long as you have the test scores, then I think the children really learn something. It's not just by rote.
Yeah.
They don't, I need to know this answer, but they learn the whole concepts, and then it's something that they remember.
One of the things that is one of the math concepts, which is extremely difficult for kids, is fractions. And for a lot of kids, learning about fractions and numbers just doesn't make sense at all. And so there's the typical use of measuring cups and measuring spoons, which is really, really important, especially for little kids to develop an intuitive sense. For some of the older kids, I found that music worked really, really well. And I play recorder, so I also taught recorder to my students because it was fun. And to incorporate the fractions with the recorder worked really well, especially for the kids who had music but didn't understand the math. And so it was really easy to work with a whole note and half notes and quarter notes and eighth notes, and to tap our feet and to play the notes clearly. And for a lot of kids, it made enough sense that they really understood the fractions using the music. And that was something that I found incredibly powerful. And I helped some other teachers do that, which I felt really good about. And they really enjoyed it because recorder is a very easy instrument to play. And it's really easy to teach kids how to play it, and then they enjoy it. And again, since we were an arts-infused school, we did music with all the kids. And so it was another instrument they could learn to play.
So what is an art-infused school or art magnet school? What can you explain that?
That's a good question. What it meant was that we taught virtually everything using art as the vehicle.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
It was wonderful. One of the things that we did was that every student in this school took music of some kind. We started in the kindergarten with Orff instruments. All the kids had, I believe it was at 4th grade, they all played keyboard. At 5th grade and 6th grade, they all played wind instruments. So I learned to play clarinet along with my 5th grade students because they all took clarinet. And then in 6th grade, they could choose to play saxophone or bass clarinet. I think the 3rd graders did percussion. I don't actually remember what all of the primary kids did, but every child left school playing an instrument. Part of the reason for doing that was that our school music conductor said that the adult concert players, whether they were symphonies or any level, were running out of musicians, and that it was because schools were no longer teaching music. Mm-hmm. And so she was also the conductor at the middle school and the high school. And so she really wanted there to be musicians coming up through the ranks so that they would fill in symphonies and orchestras at the adult level.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know, I think it was 3rd or 4th grade, and I used to go to music class. And, you know, we'd all be in the cafeteria, and we all, we'd have to clap out a rhythm.
Yeah.
I just loved that, learn, and I use that to this day of that how something goes, and okay, let's tap it out, and then I did the recorder, I was in the
great.
I was in a choir, and we would travel, and our choir was Mrs. Kidd was the music teacher. She won all the awards. She was spectacular.
Great.
And then it all went down after that. I think it was probably 5th grade. I wanted to play the clarinet. And I think it was at that time, it was before I got my teeth straightened. And they said, oh, you don't have the mouth for it. You can't do it.
How can that be? Everyone has a mouth.
But the way my teeth were configured or something, that they didn't think it would work. So that was the end of that.
Well, I was in choir because everybody took singing in our middle school, and I was asked to please lip sync because my voice was so terrible. So I understand.
But I did get into piano. My mom wanted me to play the piano. I had an unfortunate experience with my teacher. She was very strict and very traditional.
Yes.
So we butted heads, but I'm glad that I learned the basics of piano. And now, I have written my own songs.
Oh, how great.
And I do love playing the piano. Okay, thanks, Mom. If you ever hear me.
I still play piano also, but I had to stop taking lessons after 5 years when I was 12 because I refused to do recitals. I was so terrified of performing, and my teacher was a concert pianist, and she insisted that I do recitals. And when I refused, she stopped teaching, and I was so disappointed. I wish I could have continued, but she just said no. And so I still play, but not as well as I wish I did. And then I taught myself guitar when I fell in love with Joan Baez and Bob Dylan, like so many of us did. So I still noodle the guitar too, but I'm so delighted to hear that you do that kind of thing also.
And I love, as far as listening to music.
Yeah.
I think the piano is my favorite instrument to listen to. I just, and I'll tell you, if you ever want to hear some good piano, go see Rhonda Nunez. Anybody out there listening? Rhonda Nunez. She's the music director at Zion Lutheran Church. She's the most amazing pianist. And so I was thinking what you just said about music and education, especially down here in Stockton. Okay. And I think about all the history of Stockton, and several of my friends, they used to be in these the marching bands.
Yes.
And there was a big music scene here, and so much of that music has disappeared, unfortunately. We do so fortunate to have the mariachi band at Chavez High. They're exceptional, but just some of like the marching bands.
There is a band at Chavez. They played at Michael Tubbs's second State of the City gathering.
Is it a marching band?
I couldn't actually tell you.
Okay.
They're a band.
Right. Because we just
they're
need.
Amazing.
I love all the parades we have in Stockton.
Yes.
And just there's one thing about a parade, you just got to have music.
They've got to have marching
bands.
You
have to have music.
Yes.
And, so they have the trucks going down with some, recorded music or whatever, like playing off the...
Yes.
It's just not the same thing.
No. And they should be high school kids. Somehow that is what's fitting in a city parade.
So, it would be good to get back. So many people say, oh, let's change, let's progress. But there's a lot of the old ways that are really the best ways. And, just to have, all the subjects interconnected, to have the music, to be able to have... when I was in school, we used to make floats, and
the famous tissue paper and chicken wire.
The tissue paper and chicken wire. And, and we'd have the floats going down. Yes. We'd have the marching bands.
Yes.
And, we got to get back to that. Stockton is one of the best music cities with Dave Brubeck.
Yeah.
And, the training at UOP.
Yep.
But like I was talking to my friend, she's trying to find some live music venues just to go hear music.
Yeah.
And do you ever listen to music? Or?
I listen to music
in Stockton.
In Stockton, yes and no.
Where do you go?
I know, and we have, because we've had a lot of meetings. We have not been to some of the music events that I would really like to go to. I know that Channel Brewing has had some music happening, and the Brick and Mortar before the fire had music going on Friday nights. That was a tragedy.
They were doing such wonderful things at the B&M. That's a historic building, and they were starting to have art shows and music. It was exceptional.
Yeah. So there have been some places. I know that there have been performances at, I want to say the Fox Theater, at Bob Hope. However, we have not gone to them because the people have come through, like when Steve Martin came through. It is so expensive. So there have been some local things happening, and those have been wonderful. There were a group of blues and jazz players at Weber Point a year ago, and they were amazingly wonderful. So there have been some gatherings, and the Brubeck Festival, of course, is fabulous.
But
it's few and far between.
I'm thinking like clubs or,
yeah.
And when I look back at the history, there used to be so many dance clubs and movie theaters and late night establishments.
Right.
And I talked to some of these people, and they said, man, Stockton was the place to be.
Yes.
Till all hours. We were jumping, rocking. I'm going, oh, okay.
Well, in high school, used to have dances. At Lincoln, we used to have dances, and I know Stagg and Edison did, and probably Franklin did, after every basketball game, after every football game. And one of the things that went along with that was that there were live bands. And a lot of those bands went on to become kind of famous bands that they got their noodling around at the high school bands on Friday nights. And then they went on. And granted, it was the 60s. And so there were a lot of new bands everywhere at that point, which became famous, whether they were in L.A. I mean, that was when the Doors got started, and they started out as nothing. But that's not happening at this point, that there are a lot of DJ music events. But
because there needs to be, with art, with music, with dance, whatever the arts are, there needs to be places that people can try things.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning, and maybe I'm not the greatest, but I just want to, put myself out there for your enjoyment, and that's how you get better, So to be able to, open mics and, improvs and whatever, you just take a chance, and everybody enjoys themselves, and so I hope we can get more of that. So now for the rest of the program, I wanted to ask you about Reinvent South Stockton.
Okay.
And so I just was reading a very sad article about someone is destroying playgrounds.
Yes.
And but I know that you've put a lot of work into some of the playgrounds with Reinvent. I think that's one of the best things that physical things, visible things that we've done in the area is restore a lot of these playgrounds, bring art into it, paint the trash cans and the benches and make them look beautiful. And to hear that someone's destroying it, we need to take care of what we have, and so we got to find those people destroying them. But can you describe about Liberty Park? What you ended up doing?
I actually was only one of the people who was a volunteer in the construction. There was a group of people from Reinvent who worked hard to earn money and get grants to build a park through a group called Kaboom, which provides structures at a cost for putting parks together and having the playground materials. And so a large group of volunteers put together an entire park structure at Liberty Park so that the community, the children, the families have a place to go to play. And
what was there before? I didn't really see.
I'm not altogether sure. I think that there was an old, small play structure in the park. It's a 1 square block park in the center of a residential area. I think it was a park which was not terribly safe. I know that there have been a couple shootings since the park was put in, but it has not affected the community use of the park.
Yeah, that area, I think that is one of the oldest parks when Captain Weber put the city together. That was one of the oldest parks. I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to Charter Way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's on.
A little bit north of Charter Way.
Yes.
Yeah.
To go a slight step sideways from it, when you're talking about the parks that were damaged, as I understand it, when the charter was put together for Stockton by Weber, one of the things he insisted on was that for every certain number of residential blocks, there be a block set aside for a park, which is why there are places like Eden Park and Liberty Park, and those are the two I can think of at the moment, but there be those parks.
That is tremendous. I got my master's in urban planning, and that's he was a visionary in planning, and I think he also donated churches.
Really?
So he put the parks
Fantastic.
in and the churches, and he set up our town so beautifully. We need to keep keep that up.
Yes.
So.
Back to the playgrounds on the parks which were destroyed, about which I feel crushed to a degree I can't even verbalize. The parks, those parks were not parks we had done a cleanup at as part of what reInvent did. I am stunned that somebody would take away playgrounds for children.
Well, maybe now this gives us an opportunity that reInvent could go in and make those good, beautiful again.
I would love to see the kaboom.
Try to get the people in the area to eyes on the street, look out for the park, and make sure that nobody's doing what they shouldn't be doing.
I think that may be able to happen. I think the parks which had the playgrounds destroyed are not in the center of a neighborhood the way Liberty and Eden and some other parks are. I think those parks are isolated in such a way that there aren't houses looking over them. I think that...
because now you said American Legion.
Yeah.
And there are houses around, but that is, it's kind of, we call it a berm or whatever, but they're like little mounds.
Yes.
The way the dirt is mounded.
Yes. And the water at American Legion is filthy.
Right.
So it's not real easy to keep an eye on what's happening in that park. And we've done some cleanup at American Legion, but I don't... The parks at which we've done cleanups have been places where there have been benches with seats and where there have been small buildings which can have murals. So it's a different kind of setup when there's a playground like the ones that have been shown in the newspaper, which have been damaged. That isn't the kind of playground we can do much with in terms of painting and cleaning up. I'm
wondering if the playgrounds could be relocated to be closer to the people.
That's a good question. Connie Cochran mentioned that the money amount it would take to replace those playgrounds is over $100,000 each, and that's a substantial amount of money for the city to contribute to fixing them. Sadly, that is more than can be put up. So if anyone's listening to this who has a significant amount of money to donate or is able to write a grant for that type of thing, please.
Well, I was very impressed that Kaboom chose Stockton to come to Stockton. And, people always talk about money. Oh, we don't have the money. Well, it's also the way we choose to spend the money.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of wasteful spending, and that's maybe why we don't have the money. But, if all of us residents could get together, raise the money or whatever, or donate the work, or, when I watched all you guys at Liberty, you were compacting. That was the greatest. I didn't even know what the Cupid Shuffle was. And you're out there in the middle of the playground doing a dance to compact the sawdust or what underneath your feet to make this playground. Wow, they're using art to make the playground. Yes.
Well, and we also have at the playgrounds where we have done cleanups and art, a large, increasingly larger number of high school students. Entire classes have been brought by their teachers. At the last cleanup we did, I believe we had over 70 high school students.
Which cleanup was that?
I don't remember which park it was. It may have been Williams Brotherhood.
Okay.
And we had an entire art class, I believe, come. We've had a couple of soccer teams come from high schools with their coaches.
Yeah, everyone I've talked to, I think most of them said they were from Franklin. So Franklin High School, they are really stepping up.
I think Edison has also provided groups of kids, and thank you so much.
Yes.
And some of the kids have been students with whom I've talked, and they want to be artists, they want to be graphic artists, they want to be muralists, and so they've created murals on the sides of the small buildings, which have some kind of equipment inside or some kind of plumbing inside. And they create amazing things. And they get into arguments about who's going to do what. So they're solving problems or not solving the problems. But they're out there on a Saturday all day donating their time. Yeah. And they are amazing teenagers.
And so much got done at Liberty Park on the basketball field. They painted the whole United States.
Yes.
And like a map of the United States, and it's like on the basketball surface. And you were working on that the pole.
Yes, we did a pole with directions to different places, like a mileage sign, and the kids who were working with me decided what they wanted to have as the directional. And so they decided mostly on Dr. Seuss book titles or directions for Dr. Seuss places. And the last couple times I have been by the park, it's still been there. It's a wooden structure, so it would have been easy to pull it apart, take it out, wreck it. But the last few times I've been there, it was still there. Yeah. And so thank you to the students who put that up. And
I thought the planning process was interesting. There were some community meetings, and people helped. There were different designs, and they were able to say, we want this design, and vote on colors. And it's so colorful now. Yes. It's just beautiful.
And there's also an adjunct piece to it, which is for adult exercise. Right. So it's not just the children's playground part, but for the kids coming with their parents, there's a place where parents can do their exercises.
So I would love... National Night Out is such a great time for... to bring all the neighborhoods out. Yeah. I just would love to see that being used.
I would too, and I don't know if it's going to be. There have been a lot of conversations about where and how National Night Out is going to be done, and I don't know specifically about Liberty Park. Okay. But there are a lot of parks where the idea is to have people be out so that there are people and there won't be trouble.
Yeah. And that's coming up. Oh, wow.
August? Early August?
I think it's the first Tuesday in August. Is that like almost next week?
I know. It's going fast.
Oh, no.
I was thinking about what you were saying with music venues and downtown. And one of my thoughts about using places downtown is that I often hear people don't want to go downtown because they're concerned about their safety. Mm-hmm. And my personal thought is actually the counter to that, which is that if there are things happening and a lot of us go there,
Yes.
that the density of people who are safe is that
Exactly.
that will take up the space where there could be trouble, and that gradually the trouble will not be there.
Right.
And so, I used to go downtown all the time when I was a kid, and there were still problems in Stockton. Anywhere that there is a city, there are problems. When my parents first moved to Stockton in 1946, they went to a Basque restaurant downtown. They had just gotten married in Wisconsin. They drove to Stockton with everything they owned in their little Ford. Everything, including a pair of socks my mom knit for my dad. And their car was broken into and everything was stolen. Everything they owned in front of the Basque restaurant in downtown Stockton. So the point of that being that it didn't stop my parents from going downtown.
Sure.
They still went to Genoa. They still went to Gaia DeLucchi.
Yeah.
They still went to Bravo McKeegan.
Right.
So we can all still do those things.
Yeah,
I really believe that.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend, and she lives in actually Jocelyn is the host of the Wednesday show, and there's this whole thought like people that live in Weston Ranch, that they just want to all be over in Weston Ranch. There's some people, they want to make that their own little city, but downtown is for everyone in Stockton. Whether you're in South Stockton, North Stockton, East, West, we all should be able to use our downtown. For 20 years, I've gone to the Mexican Heritage Center in downtown Stockton. There have been hundreds of people coming to the Mexican Heritage Center for a reception. Okay,
Yes.
Nobody's going to be coming and doing anything there. We've had a lovely time with mariachi and ballet folklorica and looking at art and eating great food, and we're all good. We're having a great time. So, the people that don't go downtown, I'm sorry for them, but
Yeah.
That's one of our best places in Stockton. You got the waterfront.
Yeah.
You got the baseball
We go to sports games all the time.
arena,
Yep.
the hotel. You got all the history, and you got a whole lot of art. Probably at least half to 3/4 of the art that happens in Stockton happens downtown. So if you don't go downtown, you're not even seeing the art.
Right.
We're here for you. When I do the Summer Art Splash, been doing that for 6 years, and before the Alliance was doing it, I think, for 8 years. That's been going on for 14 years. That you can go around and look at all kind of art venues on the second Friday of the month. So that's still happening. That was before any stock market symposium, anything else we got. And we're there, and we'd love to see you, and we'd love to have more artists.
And you have people do art.
We have people doing art. I just need more artists to like I had to I couldn't even use one of the venues last time because I didn't have enough artists. Well, I'm trying, but before we close, I wanted to say about you had done this really neat thing with the seed library. And you got that at the Chavez Library now?
Yes, I do. And hopefully it will be at Fair Oaks.
So how does that work?
People can come into the library and look through the drawers, which have seed packets in them, and choose what kinds of seeds they may want to take out to take home and plant in their own gardens. There are flower seeds, vegetable seeds, seeds which attract pollinator insects, and decorative plants of some kind. And they don't need to pay for these seeds. They can simply take them. And if they wish, they can save some of the seeds and bring them back to share with other people. I don't expect them to do that. I'm providing the seeds because, as I do with students, hope that people can grow their own produce and have fresh vegetables so that they don't have to rely on either no grocery stores, which provide fresh vegetables, or really costly vegetables.
So they would just take a little handful?
There are envelopes into which they can put the seeds to take with them, and there are sign-ups so that I can see who has checked out seeds and which ones they've taken. The seeds are all donated by seed companies, because at the end of the year, the seed companies have to take the seeds back from the stores, because they can't, if it's 2017 seed packet, they can't keep them into 2018, so they donate them rather than throwing them away, which is great.
So that's a way for people to get, be able to get some seeds for free and go and plant something in their yard.
Yes, and hopefully a lot of children do that. I really encourage kids to come get seeds so they can go through the process I did with my students. And now that the seed libraries are open on Saturday, I'm hoping I can do more workshops with people. It's been difficult partly because of the RTD schedules not functioning. And I'm hoping to reopen a seed library at Fair Oaks so I can do have the seed library there, and because they have maker spaces at the libraries now, utilize that space.
And I just went to it was a transformative event. Hopefully, I'm hoping they'll keep doing it. They had, it's called Green Table, and it was put on by Good Stock Productions. It was at the in-season nursery. It used to be the old tank house, the Alpine Nursery on Alpine.
Yeah.
And they set up all these dinner tables in the middle of the nursery. So you're out in the beautiful garden, and with the art in the garden and all the plants, and we had a lovely meal.
Oh, how wonderful!
And the little twinkling lights, and there was music, and in season they would like to host more events.
How great!
And maybe have some food, a little restaurant or something. But it was so lovely just to be outside in nature and bring the art outside. And, I think that's my favorite part of art, when it's outside and out in public and everyone's enjoying it.
Yeah.
So.
And Stockton's a perfect place for that because we have such beautiful weather so much of the time.
Yeah. So, You're doing such great work with all the seeds and the gardens.
Thank you.
And you're an example to have all the disciplines together. It doesn't have to be separate. And
well, I have people with you like you to work with, and I'm really happy to have that. I'm very lucky. Thank you.
And so I'm so glad that we got to know each other at reInvent.
Me too.
And all the work that we've done, and we just got to keep it up.
Yes.
And watch out for all the parks.
yes, definitely.
All right. So that's it for this segment of Behind the Art Scene. And I'd like to thank Patty Lovato for being my guest. And I'll see you next time on KXVS, the voice of Stockton.